Representations of race in media have changed dramatically over the years due to social values changing. All movies, shows, comics, etc. are products of their time and place. The goal of rich white men in charge isn't to express themselves, but to deliver what they think an audience wants to see, no matter how many people they offend in the process. Studios aren't deliberately trying to trick audiences, but they're not doing this. They simply don't care about feelings. Today, people of color have been given opportunities like being able to produce and direct, but at the same time there are people in charge of those producers and directors. These people are still a majority of old white men that if hating black people became popular again, they would put blackface back on TV in a heartbeat. If people in power do something that the people support, nothing has any reason to change, which is why so many breakthroughs happen in movements and protest. In the 1960s, Jim Crow was a popular character in TV that was used to mock black Americans. White people needed these stereotypes of black people in order to feel superior, like they were the ones in charge. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 began to change things, but it took many years for blackface to fully fizzle out and stigma was still large. Franklin, the first black member of Charles Schultz's Peanuts gang, made his debut in July 1968. His presence came about through the efforts of a schoolteacher, Harriet Glickman, who wrote Schultz letters in the wake of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, pleading him to involve a black character in his comic. Schultz was scared since he was white and wasn't sure he could do it justice, but he felt he should try. The comic strip is simple, but does a good job of portraying Franklin as just a kid like Charlie. Doesn't matter what critics thought, by having a child of color seem approachable and kind, it meant kids reading it in the paper would see it, and it could have a serious impact on them. It was still the 60s though, and Schultz had to be careful. Franklin could never be seen with a girl. That was too far. In the 1990s, black people were much less stigmatized and able to be seen in much more movies because of this. There were many popular black actors at this time, such as Samuel L. Jackson.
This is a tasty burger.
And Eddie Murphy.
Really? There you go again.
Audiences generally seemed happy to see black characters, and they weren't just seen as villains. But pieces of the past still remained. Places like Australia hadn't had the same movements and pushes of America, which manifested itself into the infamous Hey Hey Saturday broadcast. One of the acts of this show involved blackface, which the contestants and Australian judges saw as a harmless throwback, but US guest judge Harry Connick Jr. was offended. A lot of people mocked the judge for this, but even one person saying something would have never happened in the 60s, making this a meaningful progression of what is allowed in society. This brings us to today's time, where black actors are not only able to thrive, but be producers and directors. Jordan Peele has not only been able to make movies, but fully express himself, having a movie about race that even won an Oscar, where all the people there are also old, white, rich people. Black people are not only seen as main characters, but superheroes now. This shows people of color as strong and heroic, spreading a positive view of them. Of course, with media, companies like Disney, that have ironically been around forever, want to generate money, which means not everything is perfect. Black Panther is an achievement, but in order to sell the movie in certain countries that aren't as accepting, Disney made sure to hide the fact Black Panther was played by a person of color as much as they could. All in all, people of color are depicted in the media much better than they used to be. Not thanks to the media, but thanks to themselves and how the landscape has changed. Things are undoubtedly better. Franklin is still a part of the Peanuts gang and kids wouldn't even question it these days. The fact that we look back on old media so appalled should be considered though. Question everything you see, think about what you are supporting, and be empathetic.
For many years when I traveled, I would say that the United States, despite this history of enslavement and Jim Crow, that we are today more democratic and more egalitarian than we've ever been. And I stopped saying that about 2 years ago. I'm not suggesting that we are back in the Jim Crow period. Don't get it twisted. It's not like that. But what I am saying is I hear and see a level of racist rhetoric that is reminiscent of when I was growing up in Alabama under Governor George Wallace. People say they don't want to talk about race, but they're doing it all the time. But they're not talking about it in places where their ideas can be challenged.